So in the Hebrew scripture, there are other kind of beings that are mentioned other than humans and God. And does he think, Bishop Sano, that these beings could possibly be extraterrestrial beings or coming from another planet or something like this?
Did you hear the question?
I did, and I would agree with him.
Okay, hello everyone. We are here with a new episode of Star Views, and tonight we have three very special guests. I'm here with Mauro Biglino, Roy Sano, and Professor Nakasone. Mauro Biglino is an Italian biblical scholar, translator, a best-selling author for Mondadori, that is one of the major publishing houses in Italy. During his career, Biglino has translated and published 17 books of the Old Testament for Edizioni San Paolo, which is the Italian's main Catholic publisher. And these books are usually Vatican-approved texts that are used in theological schools and universities. I also had the pleasure to read Mauro's last book in advance, whose title is Gods of the Bible, and I thank very much Mauro Biglino for being here with us. Thank you, Mauro. Grazie.
Thank you to you for having me here, for the invitation, and I am very glad to be here. First of all, I'm sorry for my English, but I have been studying it only for a few months. So you have to be very patient with me, very, very patient.
Thank you, Mauro. Also, we are here with Roy Sano, a bishop, a Methodist bishop. Unfortunately, Roy has some problems with his camera and the connection with his computer, so we have him on the phone. Roy has a philosophical background because he has a PhD in philosophy, and he has been a teacher, a professor for all his life in philosophy and theology, and he's also a bishop in the Union Methodist Church. Roy, thank you very much for being with us today, although we cannot see your face.
Thank you. Good to join you.
We are here with Professor Nakasone, who is a faculty member of the Graduate Theological Union in Berkeley. Nakasone is a teacher of Buddhist art and culture and has published hundreds of articles on this subject, Buddhist ethics and aesthetics and philosophy and doctrines. And is also the author of a recent book, Mapping the Pathways of Huayan Buddhist Thought. Yeah, thank you very much, Professor Nakasone. Also, Professor Nakasone, I read a very interesting article of you in this book, Extraterrestrial Intelligence. Thank you very much, Professor Nakasone, first of all.
My pleasure.
Today, we wanted to address a topic that is becoming very popular in Italy as well as in the United States, which is the possibility of a future contact with extraterrestrial intelligence. And so maybe I would like to start with Mauro Biglino and ask Mauro to, because Mauro and we had a conversation very recently also with Avi Loeb, astrophysicist, a professor at Harvard, who is involved and the founder of the Galileo project, through which they are trying to actually find, through a scientific method, extraterrestrial intelligence. Mauro, is the humanity on the verge of contacting extraterrestrial intelligence? What is the situation? It looks like things are moving fast.
I have to say that the situation is changing because after so many years in which it was not possible in Italy to speak about this topic, now due to the disclosure from the Pentagon, we can speak freely, more freely about this topic. And so for me, it's very, very important. It's important also for my work. As a translator of ancient text, Hebrew text in particular. And I think that it is a very important moment because for example, the soldiers who previously were called crazy when they told about their vision of UAP, now are called to speak about their contact with UAP. And NASA also organized several teams in order to study the phenomenon, also for the consequences that this phenomenon has on the society and on the religions. And these teams are constituted by scientists, astrophysics, theologians, because the consequences can be very, very important. So I am very happy to see this disclosure, because it's important also for my personal work.
Yes, in fact, I would like to now ask Professor Nakasone, because you also addressed this topic, as I said before, in the book, Extraterrestrial Intelligence, Academic and Societal Implications. We had the pleasure recently to speak with one of the editor, Jensine Andersen, and that was a very interesting conversation that we had. And also Jensine put us in contact. And but you wrote a very interesting article for this book, and I would like to ask you to elaborate your opinion and your view on this.
First of all, the article that appears in Extraterrestrial Intelligence, which was edited by Jensine Andersen, it's a kind of a takeoff from my article, my chapter in this book, which was published in September of last year. The philosophical background is all laid out in this book. And basically, I propose that the Buddhists would be well prepared to meet extraterrestrial intelligence because of what I call multiple centers, as opposed to Christianity, Judaism, or Islam, which has only one center, that is truth. It's divinely given to human beings. But in Buddhism, the experience of enlightenment is open to everyone. And the Buddha primarily came to his conclusion or enlightenment by observing the functions of mind. And this function is open to anyone who is willing to engage in meditative exercises. And therefore, once you become enlightened, you enjoy, or theoretically enjoy, the same experience and insight of the historical Buddha.
So you are saying that the fact that Buddhism is multi-centered, as you say, as you define it, it makes it more open to the possibility of encountering extraterrestrial intelligence.
That's correct.
Bishop Sano, if you're still there, because we cannot see you but only hear you, it's very interesting for us to have this multi-centered perspective on the subject, because you are a Christian, a Protestant, a Methodist, Protestant Christian. Professor Nakasone is a Buddhist, and Mauro and I, we come from a Catholic culture, and it's very interesting for us to hear your perspective on this. What do you think of Nakazone's and Buddhist definition of a multi-center reality as opposed to a one-center reality, such as that of the Catholic Church, for example, or Christianity in general? And do you think that applies to the topic that we are discussing of extraterrestrial intelligence?
Yes, I think it's very relevant. As I understand it, Christianity on the one hand, ideologically is exclusive, but historically it has been changed by influences from other cultures and religions. So recognizing historically what has happened, I think, to be honest, a Christian would have to say that there are Christianity has been.
But Bishop, I have, could you, I don't know if maybe you're getting farther away from the microphone, but it's very difficult to hear.
I would also like to mention the contemporary social relevance in the United States, where people are divided up into such adversarial camps. We would do well to become more tolerant of each other, and the multi-centered universe gives a framework to give the rationale to be more tolerant and understanding and to be open to each other. So it's from the perspective of my Christian perspective, and also in looking at the society here in the United States, I think it is very relevant.
It's very difficult for me, at least, to hear everything that you say because of the devices that we are using. But if I got a point, is that of tolerance, and a multi-centered universe make us more tolerant and therefore more open also to possibilities that there be extraterrestrial life out there, and possibly one day we could encounter it. I don't know if I interpreted correctly your thought on this, Bishop.
That's a good summary. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mauro, I give you the floor now, because a few days ago I received your book, Gods of the Bible. You also address the subject of extraterrestrial intelligence in this book, and you do that through your work on ancient texts. It's a very interesting perspective, because we are looking at maybe a possible future encounter of extraterrestrial intelligence, but you are looking towards the past.
Translating the Hebrew Bible, I found that the Bible clearly speaks of flying machines, about flying machines. When I say so, I don't want to say that God does not exist. I don't speak about God. I only want to say that the Bible clearly speaks about flying machines. In Ezekiel, in Zechariah, with Enoch, with Moses, and out of the Bible also any authors like Josephus Flavius, like Tacitus, like Pliny the Elder. And so for me, it's important to the disclosure, because I find a union and in a relationship between past, between the present, and between the possible future. Because those who say that the contact, it's impossible due to the distances, they don't know how we will travel in 1,000 or 2,000 years in the future. So in the past, and in particularly in the Bible, I found flying machines. And I would like to ask something, the Bishop, is it possible? I would like to know if he has an opinion about what right Presbyterian priest who has also a degree in physics and a PhD at University of Edinburgh, who wrote in his book, "The Mosaic tradition is best explained as the visible effect caused by the UFO recorded to have been in the situation," he indicates Exodus, a UFO under intelligent control. Beings from another world deliberately attempted and succeeded in molding a people committed to a particular religion's tradition. What do you think about that? If it is possible, of course.
Possibility. And I would be very open to receive that. The New Testament texts that talk about principalities and powers suggest something other forces or energies in this world that are neither God or human. And people, and then there's also the phrase, the Lord of Hosts, HOST, that suggests that there is God and there are other beings above us that are different than either God or us. So those phrases are really crucial to the biblical text, suggesting fields of energy that might be intelligible energy exist. The Bible is making allowances for that. That's the way I read the Bible. The scriptures, and they talk about God and the Lord of hosts. So there is something other than God and humankind. There are these hosts, HOST, hosts. So there are references to other kind of beings.
So in the Hebrew scripture, there are other kind of beings that are mentioned other than humans and God. And does he think, Bishop Sano, that these beings could possibly be extraterrestrial beings or coming from another planet or something like this?
So, did you hear the question?
I did, and I would agree with him.
He would agree with you that he's extraterrestrial intelligent.
It's a very difficult conversation because we cannot hear very well from here what he's saying. But if I understand correctly what he has said so far, it's a really powerful statement, because actually I found that very often Christian people are more close rather than not to the idea that there is an extraterrestrial intelligence, or there are extraterrestrial brothers out there. Professor Nakasone, I wanted to ask you, if an encounter would happen today, how do you think our life would change, or the life of our society?
Intellectually, it would be very challenging for Buddhists as well as Christians, because this is something we didn't expect. More to the point, we are talking about intellectual or philosophical intelligence, but I just want to reiterate what Sano Sensei said on the common grassroots level, that the multi-centered universe would be good, because there's so much religious conflict in America today. And you mentioned there's a need to be tolerant for other people and other faiths.
Mauro, is there anything that you want to say on this?
I want to ask a question to Professor Nakasone, if it is possible. in the chapter your chapter in this book, you wrote, humanity's creative imagination is much more advanced than theological and academic disciplines that may not have the conceptual tools to adequately respond, since there is mounting evidence of the existence of intelligent non-human beings and actual contact remains a possibility. Can you tell us something about the Pratityama Samutpada?
Pratitya Sampada is this is the signature, I believe, the Buddhist position that all things come together and causes and conditions. And this is the reality of the world. I understand that Christianity, and I'm surrounded by them all the time at the Graduate Theological Union, and are very adverse to the possibility that there are other standards of truth inhabiting the world, inhabiting the theological discourse. And Pratitya Sampada is totally, it's a human discovered. The Buddha is a human being, and he discovered this truth during his meditational activities. So my position in the article is that it's an ideology, human concocted ideology, and as opposed to divinely given ideology, which is a one-centered universe, absolute centered universe. And it has its rational difficulties because if one doesn't have a standard, it leads to relativism, and this is very clear in ethics, for example.
Thank you.
For me, it's so refreshing, coming maybe from a different kind of experience, to hear from religious people such as Roy Stano and Professor Nakasone, to hear such a freedom-oriented approach to problems, extraterrestrial intelligence, but also like the way we live with other people. So it's very beautiful, you know, this multi-centered universe idea. Professor Sano, I know that the connection is very difficult here, but I wanted to ask you something. As a bishop, as a person of faith, how do you think that a potential encounter with extraterrestrial intelligence would change your faith, or in general, how religious people live and their conception of God?
So I think Christians would be forced to acknowledge that, oh yeah, they already believe in that kind of being. So, but I think it would be very difficult for them to admit it. They would find that difficult to acknowledge, but they already are acknowledging it in other ways.
I don't know if Mauro or Professor Nakasone, you want to elaborate on this idea?
Well, the Buddhist worldview is there are multiple realities. And so Buddha himself goes to hell and meets all kinds of, this is folklore, of course, but it's a very persuasive in the sense that we Buddhists generally believe in multiple sets of reality and inhabited by all kinds of beings, good and evil.
It's important to have an open mind. To have an open mind, because the physics teaches us that almost all is possible. Almost all is possible. So the presence, the reality of beings, of extraterrestrial beings, can be our brothers. So we must have an open mind.
This is what we have learned tonight, and I think it was, despite the technological difficulties, a very interesting conversation. In a way, it could be a metaphor of a future encounter with extraterrestrial intelligence, because maybe we will not be able to communicate so easily, but still, if we have an open mind and possibly an open heart, we can definitely find some common ground. And before ending, I want to remind you a couple of things. First of all, Professor Nakasone is also an artist and a calligrapher, and he has a beautiful, beautiful website that I encourage everyone to see. Professor Nakasone, why don't you say the name of your website?
It's called Formless Form.
Formlessform.net. It's really beautiful. Go see what he does, because it's amazing. So Professor Nakasone, thank you very much for being for your time today.
Oh, thank you for arranging me, and thank you, Jessine, for connecting us.
Yes, I would like to thank Bishop Roy Sano. I'm sorry for the technical difficulties here, but we grasped some very interesting ideas from him. So thank you very much, Bishop.
It's an honor.
Mauro Biglino, thank you also to you. And I want to remind everyone that Mauro's latest work is coming out very soon, Gods of the Bible. Mauro, thank you very much, and we look forward to reading you.
Thank you to you. It was a great pleasure to be here tonight.
Thank you, everyone. And if you like the video, please share, like, comment, and to the next.
I hope we meet in person sometime.
Yes.